I think the best creativity really is born of constraint, and film is at the kind of center of too little time, too little money, but so much talent. I love the idea that someone might find my work 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and it might make them feel some type of way.
Arielle Cooper-Lethem is an American costume designer based in London. She has worked on movies such as Paterson and BBC's series The Listener, and is now in the spotlight for her subtle and remarkable work on Too Much, Lena Dunham's latest show. Arielle, I'm delighted to welcome you on Profession Costumière. Welcome.
Oh, hi, Céleste. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So my first question for you would be, how did you become a costume designer? What led you to this profession?
Well, kind of a long road. I always knew I wanted to be in fashion, and I thought maybe I wanted to be a fashion designer or an editorial stylist. And I think by the time I was at university, I wanted to do editorial styling very clearly. And yeah, I got an internship at W Magazine, kind of in my first year of university.
So back then you were in the United States, right?
I'm from New York. I grew up in New York, and I decided not to leave for university. And yeah, I was an intern in the accessories closet at W Magazine, which was amazing, like just in terms of, kind of becoming familiar with brands and designers and kind of seeing the pace of in and out and the turnaround. It's like nothing else. And this was kind of at a time before every single girl wanted to work in fashion. I think I was kind of the last generation pre-internet to work in fashion. Was really about this unglamorous sort of grit. We didn't really have any visual imagery around us of kind of stylist coming out with a million shopping bags, or having their picture next to Beyonce. Like, we were a generation where we did it because we looked at magazines and we loved it, and we really worked long hours. I grew up quite poor, and I was at New York University, one of the most expensive schools in America. And I was paying my own way, going into debt, really. And I got some interviews set up for kind of in-house positions with different magazines, and they were all offering me like, $20,000 a year, working 14-hour days. You get a free pair of shoes occasionally. And it was a really hard moment for me because I was kind of surrounded by girls whose parents, were paying for their apartment right next to the office. And so they were working just as hard as me, but they had this thing that I didn't have. And yeah, I ended up getting a job that paid. I did retail on commission. I was still doing some styling kind of for fun to get my hands dirty. But yeah, I started working in restaurants. I started working in retail, which at that time was paying quite well for rent in the city. You could get a job in retail, and with a bit of commission, you could pay your rent. And it was a kind of sad period for me because I had so much fun in fashion, and I was like, I wasn't with Camilla Nickerson, but I was in the same room as Camilla Nickerson, and, around all these beautiful things. And I worked under people that I just adored, but it just wasn't practical for me at that point in my life. And so, yeah, I spent many years kind of a bit lost, and like missing that creative core. And I left New York at some point. I dropped out of NYU, and I left New York, and I moved to New Orleans, Louisiana, which at that time was like Hollywood South. There were these amazing tax credits it was really booming film-wise. And I had a friend's mother who was a production accountant, was actually Israeli, but was working down there at the time. And she said, just come and work with me for a bit. There's a lot of other productions in the building. Talk to someone, talk to one of the costume designers and get a job in costume. And I did. My first job in costume was on a Cinemax series, which was part of HBO. And it was set in the 70s.
Nice.
It was called Quarry. And I was doing some kind of assisting stuff, returning, buying, measuring, etc. But then they let me do background costuming. So I was basically dressing all of the extras in these incredible 1970s costumes. And I just fell in love with it immediately. And I knew right away that this was a space that kind of had a permanence to it that felt really special. The idea that something gets put on, it doesn't get put on celluloid anymore, but this idea that it exists maybe for someone to find many, many years later, and it's not connected to the cycle of clothing sales. It's deeply personal, right? And there are people who don't care about clothes at all who will watch this thing and maybe, want to dress a bit different or be a bit different or behave a bit different. Yeah, I really felt this sense of belonging the second I stepped into that space. And from there, yeah, I just turned one job into another.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing how you came to costume design. And I think one of the first feature movie you worked on is actually Jim Jarmush's Paterson.
Yes.
So I was curious to learn about that experience. Like how did it feel working on your first feature film, and what was your role on the set or before maybe the movie was shooting?
Yeah, that was a magical experience. That was, yeah, I did a few jobs in New Orleans, and then one of the supervisors that I worked with in New Orleans was based in New York and said, "Oh, come do this Jim Jarmusch film." And I had obviously known who Jim was, and Dead Man is one of my favorite films of all time. Down by Law, I mean, iconic. So I basically left New Orleans to go do this job as the lowest on the totem pole. And the costume designer, Catherine George, brilliant. And I'm still close to her to this day. And it was this really, magical thing where, because it was indie film, I was quite low on the totem pole, but I was in the same room as Catherine, and Jim would pop in and check in on what we were doing. It just had all the magic that I always thought kind of working on independent film would have. Maybe it was a unicorn and I didn't realize it at the time, but it really got me going. And then in that film, the lead character, played by Golshifteh, makes her own clothes. She's kind of painting on her own clothes. So I was getting to actually paint on the clothes that she was wearing in the film. It was really hands-on. And yeah, I'm really grateful to Catherine and Jim for that experience.
Well,
And I love the
beautiful
film. I
feature.
think the
I
film
do
came
love
out
it too.
beautifully. Yeah.
It does. It's lovely to know that the dots on her dress and so on are actually made by your own hands.
Well, a lot of them, yeah, which, is a very rare experience. If you work on a kind of big budget film as a PA, you're just doing returns, basically. You're picking up press, you're doing returns, and that's it. So it was quite special to get to be in this space where I was actually being creative on this very special film, and also like taking the bus out to New Jersey from New York City looking for clothes and picking up things. It was a really special time. Yeah.
And where were you picking up clothes? Was it, I guess, different sources, but was it a lot of vintage or rentals?
A lot of vintage. There are some really good costume designers in New York have these connections with vintage hires that have been kind of priced out of New York City. So they're in Jersey. But then also Catherine wanted this very real aspect. The film takes place in Paterson. So we would, she would send me to like a little like streetwear store that's like based in Newark or Paterson, to get a baseball cap that's like got the Paterson, it was interesting. When you grow up in New York City, New Yorkers don't go to New Jersey. New Jersey goes to New York. But it was really nice to get this experience where it was like kind of over the river.
Lovely. I love that you were in the bus, like the movie that actually sets place in a bus as well. So it was really
Exactly. Yeah.
And another movie where you were also a costume assistant was Ocean's 8, with a very impressive 5-star cast, including Kate Blanchett, Anna Hathaway, or Rihanna. So I was curious if you have any anecdotes, memories from that experience.
That was also amazing. That's actually what I did after Paterson. And the designer was Sarah Edwards, really lovely and talented woman. And it was the opposite of Paterson in that she had like, I think 6 assistant costume designers, a whole studio of makers. There was a room of gifting, just,
Oh, wow.
all of the fashion houses, all of the labels had sent presents for Rihanna, presents for Kate. So part of the job was when they came in for the fitting, like, do you want any of this? And then there was a kind of economy of like, oh, what's left over after.
Because the point of the brands was to try to have their clothes seen in the movies, or rather also they could take it home, or
No, they were desperate to just have Kate or Rihanna or whoever just take something home and maybe wear it and get photographed by
Yes,
paparazzi
okay,
or
makes total
something, or
sense.
fall in love with the brand. So yeah, it was a lot of beautiful clothes. I was going, up to Fifth Ave and Madison Ave to pick up like $200,000 furs, and going to Cartier to pick up things that had security escorts. And it was kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from what I had been doing, and was really valuable in that way. I mean, I got to work with so many really talented, mostly women and a couple of men, who, there's just the kind of the operation of all these moving parts and all these people kind of knowing their roles and knowing how to pass down the responsibility to someone else. And at the end of the day, it all gets done somehow by some miracle. But it was really good to see kind of how people fit in these moments. And then, of course, you have a cast like that, so incredible, lots of different personalities, every single one as important as the next. Kind of watching Sarah and her team move through that very beautifully and graciously was a massive learning curve for me. And funny enough, actually, that film was shooting during the first election for Donald Trump. And we all thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. So Sandra Bullock and Kate Blanchett, both beautiful people, decided to throw up like a party, an election night party for the whole cast and crew, because we were filming that day. So they hired out this bar in Williamsburg and Mexican food, and we thought it was going to be a celebration. And, people were wrapping out kind of late. And, at one point,
I can imagine how the party turned.
At one point, I think like Rihanna was just sitting at the bar alone, like taking shots, because it was just absolute despair. No one expected it to go that way, and now look, however many years later, where we are. But it was, when I think about Ocean's 8, I think about that night.
Wow. At least you got to kind of drink shots with Rihanna on that night, which is a pretty nice
kind of. Not really.
Like, being in the next, breathing the same air.
Yeah. One of the assistants is another designer. A lot of those assistants now have gone on to design on their own. Megan Kasperlik, and she was heavily pregnant at the time with her first child. I came in the next day and I was just like so sad. And she's like, I get it. I've got a baby in my belly. This is the most depressing thing ever, but like, we have to get back to work. And I'll never forget that. Yeah.
And speaking of women who you worked with and who inspired you, I also wanted to ask you about your collaboration with Rachel Dainer Best. I
Yeah.
think you worked with her twice for Assassination.
I assisted her 3 times. So actually, this is the kind of, it's all a connect the dots, how you get from one place to another. And so Megan Kasperlik, I met on Ocean's 8. And then she was designing Trey Schultz's second film, It Comes at Night. Rachel was her assistant. And Megan asked me to come up. They were shooting in Woodstock, New York, upstate. And she asked me to come and help out. And that's how I met Rachel, was being a PA on It Comes at Night. And me and Rachel got on really well. She kind of took a big chance on me, asking her to be her assistant on Assassination Nation. And I loved working with her. Actually, funny enough, Rachel, for almost 10 years, assisted Heidi Bivens, who did Euphoria. And she also did Spring Breakers, which is part of the reason why Rachel was considered for Assassination Nation, because they loved the aesthetic of Spring Breakers and they knew that Rachel was a big part of that. So yeah, it's kind of funny how you get connected to certain people and then you become very close to these people and you learn different things from each one of them. It was really nice working with Rachel because she's just a couple years older than me, but she had been working in film for a lot longer, loves independent film just like I do. It was so cool to kind of see her process and see what she was doing. And she felt like my friend, but I was like, oh my God, like she's kind of living the dream. And she's so cool. So it was really, it was eye-opening to me. I think working with Rachel made it feel really attainable in some awesome way. I was like, yeah, this is just a girl who like really loves something and like is working her ass off to do it. And like, maybe I can be that girl too. We did Assassination Nation. And then we did a film which filmed in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with a director called Miles Joris Perifit, Dreamland. And it was set in the 1930s, starring Margot Robbie. And it was a Dust Bowl film, which we did our first day of shooting like high up in the mountains in Las Vegas, New Mexico. Most people have not heard of Las Vegas, New Mexico.
I haven't, I must say.
And we're in this town with like stray dogs wandering around. There's like, it's kind of almost a ghost town. And it just starts snowing our first day of filming. And it's supposed to be the Dust Bowl, like no rain, no. So that was really fun. But yeah, I've learned so much working with Rachel, and actually ended up working with Heidi Bivens a bit through Rachel, which was a totally different and amazing learning experience. Yeah.
And first discuss The Listeners, which is a BBC show starring Rebecca Hall, and also an actor that we also see in Too Much, Prasanna Puarnaraja. I don't know if I pronounce his name well.
Yes, Prasanna, exactly.
Yes. So it's a show about an English teacher who starts hearing noises. And I wanted to ask you about that show and how you approached the project. And that now that you were a costume designer, yes, what was your project? How did you approach it?
Yes, well, that show is actually based on a fantastic book, if anyone's looking for a beach read or a read who needs a beach, by the person who created the show named Jordan Tannehill. And the book is called the same name, The Listeners. And I read the book. Janixa Bravo directed, who also directed Zola, I think most well known. And Janixa's very fashionable, iconically so. Has been to the Met Gala many times, people love to dress her. And she, I think, had a lot of clear ideas about what the script should look like. The book actually takes place in America, in the Badlands. They decided, once the BBC was interested, to kind of adapt the story to Northern England. But I think for Janixa, it was really about how do we put this in the modern day world, but kind of make it feel like it's some world that's right next to the one we live in, but is not ours, to turn up the sensory feeling of this woman kind of losing her tether. And so, yeah, from the beginning, it was always, how do we make it real, but separate? And how do we create heightened feelings in a world where really, I mean, spoiler alert, there is a kind of sexual tension between this woman who starts to hear a mysterious hum, and she asks her family, "Can you hear this?" She's a school teacher. Our family says, "No, we can't hear this." She goes to school. She's asking everyone at the school, "Can you hear this?" Everyone says, "No, we can't hear this." And then one day, one of her students comes up to her and says, "I can hear this." And they start to look for the source of this sound together. There is a kind of sexual tension between them because he is, in some ways, her only comfort in this really alienating moment. And we knew we couldn't kind of let them have that sexual energy, but we were asking ourselves, how do we feel this desire? How do we introduce excitement without getting the obvious thing, which is them making out? So then it became
Mm.
about taking away certain colors and removing ourselves from reality as we know it, just enough so that it's believable, but also leaves you searching for something constantly.
Very interesting, that idea of removing colors so that it
Mm.
looks almost the same, but it's not as our own word. Like you worked with colors, for instance, to create that parallel word.
Yeah, massively. To the unknowing eye, you might not even realize it, but there are new colors introduced in each episode. It's 4 episodes, and it was always meant to be a kind of standalone. It was never meant to be a series 2. With each episode, you meet a new color. And the idea was that even if we don't notice it consciously, that we're kind of feeling something new, subconsciously.
Very interesting. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really looking forward to watching it.
You should. It's a kind of a very long film, and it was shot on 35 millimeter. The cinematographer is Jodie Lee Lipes, who's incredible. And yeah, to shoot a TV show on film is like unheard of.
Mm,
And Rebecca Hall is just the dreamiest. Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch, and it's in a world of its own, I think.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. So I also wanted to discuss, obviously, Too Much, one of your most recent works. Like many costume and fashion lovers, I very much enjoyed your work on the show. It's beautiful, complex, subtle. So I'm very excited to discuss it with you. And before we dive in, I just wanted to let the audience know that we might have a few spoilers. So come back when you've watched the 10 episodes, because this happened to me with your Who What Where interview. I
Oh
found out
yeah.
something too soon and I was like, oop, I'm pausing and I'll come back to it.
Yeah, I think everyone assumes now that you're binging,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. True,
And it's
true.
some of us don't have time to binge. We have to watch in
Yeah,
little
exactly.
pieces. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for those people, come back when you're you're done watching the show.
Yeah.
So first, can you share how you got involved on this project?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your kind words about it. Yeah, I met Lena Dunham through a mutual friend, Jeremy O'Harris. Um, and I loved her energy and her intelligence from the moment I met her. And she, in true keeping with the series, which was kind of the seed for the series, she moved to London for love. She was working here, and then she met Lou Felber, who she created the show with. They had a kind of whirlwind romance and got married not long after. And I also am a New Yorker who moved to London for love. So I married a Brit, and we were doing long distance for about a year and a half. And I happened to be here when the world shut down in 2020. yeah, now I live here. Um, and so we had that in common, New Yorkers in London. And pretty early on into our friendship, she was like, I'm working on this show with Lou. It's about a New Yorker who moves to London and falls in love. And like, you would be perfect to design it. And at this time, I was kind of starting to do the listeners. And I read a script. I mean, firstly, I was like, yes, Lena, anything you want to do with me, I absolutely would. But yeah, I read the first script and it was so filled with kind of costume references and specific clothing references in a way that I wasn't expecting. And I thought, oh my God, this is like a dream job. Thank you, Lena Dunham. And yeah, that's kind of how it began.
That's great. There's something about Jess in you, then you also.
I am a Jess. Yeah, I am a Jess. Maybe I'm, a Polly. Maybe I'm a, but I'm a bit a Jess. I'm a bit, yeah. It's like, it's a bit Sex in the City that way, right? Like a certain kind of girl can see herself in
Exactly.
each of the female characters. You take a little bit.
Exactly. And it's actually, you mentioned the script and that there were many references to clothes in the script, and it's actually something I wanted to ask you, because it's something I love also in the dialogues, which it's very different, but it made me think of Clueless a little bit, where some of the best
Totally.
dialogues
It's an
are about the
Alaya.
clothes. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was wondering if everything was already in the script, or did some costumes also inspire some of the dialogue?
No, I can't really take much credit there as far as the dialogue. There was loads of costume references in the script, quite specific. I mean, I don't think a different designer would have necessarily read it and seen what I saw,
Yeah, definitely.
but for me when I read the script, the characters were so clear right away. And then there were a lot of specific things like her pioneer nightgown and a dress that kind of felt like the pioneer nightgown. And there were a lot of prompts about, when they go to the episode 8 wedding, the feel of that dress, the kind of lame, the sheen, the kind of Josie Grossi, like 80s prom dress vibe. A lot of that was in the script. I think it did work the other way around sometimes, where there'd be something very specific in the script and I'd say, oh, are you okay if like it's not quite that thing? And then we would find the thing, but the prompt was always there, right? So occasionally
Mm.
I'd be like, oh, she's wearing a maxi dress, and I'd be like, can it be a mini dress? And the dialogue might change based on that. But
Mm.
yeah, there was
Yeah,
loads
so it
of,
was also open for discussion and
yeah.
reinterpretation if necessary. But it was also something I wanted to ask you about. But I guess then Lena Dunham is quite into clothes and costumes, and she had like quite a vision for how the characters would dress.
Yeah, I mean, yes, Lena is a fashion icon, absolutely. And I've been really lucky actually, in that way of working with directors that are A, just really cool women, but B, really care about clothes, which I don't think people who don't work in film and don't work in costume realize. But there are directors who just are kind of like, yeah, put anything on them. Like,
Mm.
it's clothes. Who cares? Those directors do exist. So I feel really grateful to get to work with directors because for me, it's more fun to have a director who's excited about the clothes. And yeah, Lena is very much that director. And also, she's got, she's a polymath in kind of every way. She's got a very referential brain. She doesn't really forget the name of things. Her world is very big and she gives it to everyone that she meets. Yeah, it's interesting because she was quite open to my interpretation. Like I don't think there was a visual image that she was like it has to look like this. She kind of let me do what I wanted to do, and I think she had a good first instinct in kind of hiring me because we had this shared language through our upbringing in New York City at around the same time, and I think that's instinctively why she brought me on because she didn't really need that many words or images to share with me. We kind of just were we were in the right space from the beginning, which was nice.
That sounds really good. And there are many characters in the show, so I was wondering what was your process approaching their wardrobe? Did you, for instance, start with Jess and build the other wardrobes around, or did you work differently?
Obviously, Jess is at the kind of core of the world, and there is so much fantasy and romance to her. And then I think there's also this obvious aspect to the dynamic from the beginning, which is that she has to feel out of place in London, in this version of London that we're getting. That's a disappointment, a failure of the imagination she had of London, right? So this already sets up for me a very obvious space in which she's romantic visually and delicate in some kind of tangible way. I guess it also was really important, and this is where Lou Felber comes into play, is kind of showing this side of London that a lot of Americans who are watching Netflix never really see. This pub, this gritty pub scene, this like posh Notting Hill scene, really accurately. Maybe it's a little heightened at times, right? Because this is why we watch films and TV, is to like escape something, right? We don't want it to look exactly like reality because some of that is ugly. We just erase it. But it was really important to also place her in a world that felt exciting to show for the first time to certain audiences. So yeah, I think Felix was a bit based on those worlds, the kind of the guy that is the musician in South London and grew up around posh people. Like, how do we make him feel real and also feel really separate to her? And then Felix also had to feel like an outsider in this world, right? It's important narratively. And then building the world around them kind of unfolded from there. I think it was really straightforward, contrasting Jess and Felix. But then it's like, how do we make them feel believable together and also make them feel in a bubble separate from the rest of this very big world?
I believe some costumes, and for instance, for some costumes for the dog Astrid, those clothes that were created especially for the show.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of clothes that were created especially for the show, and you don't really think of contemporary costume design in that way. But sometimes it is that way. You see something that's just like, oh, they bought that in a store, and it's like, no, actually, that took a team of like 12 people and like hundreds of hours, because sometimes you know what the thing is in your mind and it just doesn't exist, especially when it comes to dog costuming. That's true. I think with Astrid, Astrid is a kind of main character in that there is an emotional space for Jess where Astrid is kind of the vehicle for her to treat someone else the way she wants to be treated. And so I think that was part of the dog costuming, is really showing that Astrid is a part of this family and not an afterthought. And it's like, well, if I'm putting on a coat, obviously you get a coat. And it was just a really easy way to say this dog is as important as I am. But then practically, the dog Mia, who's kind of the hero Astrid, would sometimes have to be stood in for by their brother Muppet, who was a boy and had a penis. So we often had to cover the dog's private parts because they were interchangeable unless you could tell that they were a boy or a girl dog.
I love this practical aspect of your dog costumes in this case.
Yes.
And can you tell us about a few clothes that were made for the human cast? Like, for instance, maybe Jess or other characters?
Yeah. So that scene in episode 2 where, I mean, it's kind of all of episode 2 where they go to the restaurant for outfit of the day. It's it's Kim and Boss and Jess. That was quite scripted, as Jess was in a kind of skirt suit set with tights with stockings that she then has to take off because they're like, take off the tights and put on some lipstick. And then they do the slow motion walk into the restaurant. That was all scripted, and could not find anything for sale that we like. So we made that pale blue suit
Which
for
is so beautiful,
Jess.
and which doesn't have shoulder pads, as her
Yeah.
colleague remarks.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird with costume design. You don't, it's a bit from your gut, which moments kind of require the budget and the time and which moments don't. But that felt like a moment where she's out of place and she's weird, but also I wanted her to look special and cool. So
Mm.
yeah, we weren't really finding the suit in the world. And it's actually like the quality of the fabric is really nice and the cut of the suit is really nice, and it just was a way of kind of, it's like, oh, this is like not the right thing, but it's also special. And yeah, of course, the episode 8 wedding dress we had to make because she needed multiples of them, and we actually ran wire through the layers of the dress because she was supposed to be climbing out of this window, and we thought, oh, how funny would it be if through the episode her skirt just kind of gets more and more like wonky, so we put wire through that. Obviously she has all of these fantasy flashes and period flashes, like there's a Dudley Do Right homage where Emily Ratajkowski is tied to the tracks and Jess's character bursts in a Mountie costume, Dudley Do Right, and saves her from Zev. We had this reference of the cartoon, but it was like, okay, how does it look in real life? And actually we had Batsheva Hay make the little costume, the blue dress that Emily Ratajkowski is wearing, which was like really special and fun. And yeah, it's just like, how do you find those moments? How do you decide those moments where you say, okay, we could buy something, but it's not quite right. So maybe we put a little more into it and make it what we want it to be.
I also wanted to ask you a few questions about costumes you like in general. And for instance, I was very curious about, is there any movie, TV series costumes that you especially like, that inspire you, and that you'd like to share with us?
I'm inspired by so much. It's very rare. I mean, if I'm being honest, I watch a lot of when I have time to watch films, I watch a lot of older films. It's the same with music and books. I just feel like I have so much to catch up on. So I try and start from the beginning rather than the now. I mean, there are a ton of contemporary designers working that I admire. I think Catherine Martin is amazing, just in that one of my like dreams. And I think something that really makes sense is to production design and costume design. When you think about it, it's the world, it's the fabric, it's the texture. And I love this when you see designers doing the clothes and the scène, which I think actually used to be slightly more common than it is now. And I don't know, I get really inspired by like, yeah, like I just love the way like films from the 70s in color look like, you know, like opening night. I think the kind of simplicity of quality garments, well cut quality garments on like well cast people sometimes is the best thing.
I agree. And I think they're still very special and they don't look outdated at all. And I think, as you say, it's also because the fabrics are amazing. They're something that, yeah, didn't age.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, they are just occupying space on the screen, you know? It's a whole symbiosis of things. I do kind of get hung up on this idea that now that the quality of production has diminished so much, it is just so much more difficult as a designer. You shooting on something and there are people in the background, oh, come as you are. And the kind of quality of that look has just gone through the floor. And it's funny because you look at these old films and you're like, they look amazing, even in the early 2000s and the 90s, but really there was such an advantage of just quality construction that made the job so much easier. You could turn a camera on anything and it was good to look at.
Interesting. And in your own work, is there, I know it's a tough question, but is there anything specific that you made or assembled that you're really proud of?
Yeah, I mean there was a moment in The Listeners actually with Rebecca Hall's character, and speaking of John Cassavetes and Gina Rowlands, she wanted to homage Woman Under the Influence very specifically, and so we made this cotton dress, and I had to find a fabric that, because in Woman Under the Influence, she's kind of wearing like an African print dress. Like, this is the 70s, and it's a little shift dress, like a mini shift dress, and she has her zip up over it. And we were kind of recreating this, and I found this vintage like exercise jacket and built this dress to go under it. And the fabric was obviously contemporary, but I was really happy with the way the whole look came out in the end. And it's one of my favorite films. It was so fun to kind of try and recreate. I mean, Gina Rowlands is forever an icon that we will love and cherish.
Oh, that's a beautiful piece indeed. And what do you like most about your job as a costume designer?
Oh man, I love so much about it. I think I love what we discussed before, the idea that someone might find my work 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and it might make them feel some type of way. I really like that. And I just feel so lucky to be able to work with so many new, highly driven, highly intelligent and creative people all the time, and have these new problems that, yeah, I think the best creativity really is born of constraint, and film is at the kind of center of too little time, too little money, but so much talent, and you kind of come up with these solutions that you end up falling in love with.
Oh, that's beautiful. Do you have any main problem that comes to mind, like something that you thought you would never resolve and then eventually you managed?
Oh, I mean, it really, I don't want to sound dramatic, but it really is shocking how every single, you learn a lot of new tricks. It's not that different from being a parent, you learn a new trick and you think, yes, I've got it. Like, this problem's never going to happen again. But then the subject changes and there's a new problem, and the trick you learn doesn't apply at all. And you think, okay, like, I guess that trick's out the window. And it really is. It's this kind of constant unfolding of mystery. But what pleasure is there in life if there's not mystery, right?
Right. And is there any specific kind of project you'd really like to work on, and why? Could be people you'd like to work with, a special decade or century, anything?
Completely. Yeah. I mean, so many things. I think I'd love to do some sort of sci-fi. I think is probably the answer for a lot of people. I think fictional worlds for me are the most interesting, which is why I love contemporary so much, because even though it's very real, it also can manifest in kind of infinite ways. And I constantly walk down the street and I'm surprised by the people I see. But yeah, I think this kind of fantasy sci-fi world I would love to be in. There are so many living directors that that I would, lose my mind to work with. I would love to work with Amy Sedaris. I think Strangers with Candy was like one of the most formative shows for me growing up. I would love to work with like Almodovar. Yeah, I'm just a student to so many talented, beautiful people, really.
I hope you'll get to meet with them one day, and that you'll have an exciting sci-fi project soon. I'd love to see you work on that. Thank you so much, Arielle, for sharing your passion for costume design and so many interesting anecdotes. And thank you for listening to Profession Costumière. If you like the show, you can give it 5 stars and comment on your listening platform. I'll soon be back with a new episode. Bye!